So I was just really curious to observe in more detail the journey that people were going on. Yeah, you can do a 4-day week, but we expect you to do the same total number of hours. It really forced people to engage in taking just a little bit of time to have those really powerful, really meaningful, valuable conversations. Average masks a lot of individual differences in the different journeys that people are going on. So statistically, there's a significant correlation between the magnitude of change in someone's sleep and the magnitude of change in their productivity. And the 4-day week or short working week, 9-day fortnight, half days, is quite a potent carrot to dangle to engage people.
Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Sam Knowles. And joining us today on Data Malarkey is Charlotte Rae, Associate Professor in Psychology at the University of Sussex. Charlotte is the UK's leading quantitative researcher on the impact of the 4-day working week. Charlotte indeed is a one-person Oxbridge college with a BA in psychology from Oxford and a PhD in neuroscience from Cambridge. For the past dozen years or so, she's been at the University of Sussex, where today she leads the Sussex 4-day week research project. I first met Charlotte in 2022 at an event hosted by the Brighton Chamber. Charlotte was reporting very promising early data from the project, looking to share success stories and stimulate local entrepreneurs, employers, and businesses to take part. The project applies an evidence-based, data-driven lens to the personal and corporate impact of the 4-day working week, empowering and enabling individuals, teams, and whole organizations to achieve the same or indeed more in less time. Hundreds of companies have been through this program already, ours included, and Charlotte and her team are working with micro, small, medium, and large businesses. It's great to have you with us, Charlotte. Welcome to Data Malarkey.
Thanks so much for having me, Sam.
Now, first off, can you tell me if that's a good narrative of how you got to where you are today? Anything I've missed off or got wrong? It's your chance to put the record straight.
Great, thank you. Only one edit to make there. There are hundreds of companies in the UK who've trialled a 4-day week, but not all of them have been through the Sussex research programme. It's about 30 or so who've trialled a shorter working week with us directly.
And does that mean that you have research partners in other academic institutions who are running it simultaneously?
Yes.
And where are they based?
So University of Cambridge and the University of Salford were two of the key partners on the national trial. Part of that was looking at qualitative data alongside self-report quantitative data from the waves of the national trials.
Cool. Well, listen, we'll come back to the 4-day week and the way that you're looking to kind of assess the impact on both individuals and corporations, productivity, happiness, sleep, and all that. We'll come back to that in some detail. But before we get down and dirty with data, and as I say, I was so impressed the first time I saw you talk with the kind of the lightness of touch with which you present huge amounts of data and really make sense of that and see what it means. But before we get down to data, I wanted to ask you a question that's designed to get to the heart of what makes you you, and it doesn't necessarily ask you to tell us about the day job. So tell me, Charlotte, how do you spend your time?
Oh, well, generally Monday to Thursday, I'm here in the office, a mixture of working together with my academic colleagues, planning the research, chatting through the data collection, making plans for analysis and processing, then spending time with our employers who are participating in the trial at various points along their journey, and doing some academic writing or pieces of writing for our participating employers as part of those 4 days. And then typically on my 4-day week day off, I do a mixture of kind of catching up on household chores, some exercise classes, and then just see where the rest of the day takes me, which leaves the weekend for kind of weekend stuff. Yeah.
Really good to hear that you practice what you preach. We will definitely come back to that. So imagine that, because I do know quite a lot about it, but imagine that I know nothing, and I imagine that a lot of our viewers and listeners will know little. But can you tell us about the Sussex 4-day week, what it aims to achieve in terms of healthier staff, happier teams, more productive workplaces? Give us more than the elevator pitch. Tell us
Sure.
about it.
Yeah. So, how this project came about was several years ago. I saw the media headlines coming out about the 4-day working week, and the improvements that you could see both to staff well-being, but also performance, productivity, and service in the workplace. Some of those trials were run by this chap, Andrew, in his own business, who thought it was such a success he wrote a book about it. And I saw the early results coming out from that. And my background originally is not actually a business psychologist, it's as a neuroscientist. But it got me really curious seeing those early bits of data. What is it that's going on inside here? What is it that's going on inside the brain that's actually behind those media headlines? Because ultimately, what is it that creates work? It's the human brain. Whether you're a marketing manager or a bricklayer, it's the human brain behind all of those outputs and productivity. So that was what originally inspired me to set up the Sussex 4-day week programme. Initially as a research project, because I was just really curious to observe in more detail the journey that people were going on in making that switch and the transformations that it led to. So we connected at that Brighton Chamber talk back in 2022, where we showed some of the early pilot data that we got from that initial wave. But we learned a lot from that initial wave back then, also about the wider journey that the business was going on, including the preparations and the changes to working practices and work reorganisation that were needing to happen in order to accommodate the shorter working week, but still get everything done. And so then the project really evolved to a second stage, where it then also became about sharing those insights that we had learned back to more and more employers who were curious about going on the journey themselves. So there's now kind of 3 phases to the programme if an employer wants to join and participate. Firstly, we help them prepare for a trial, think about the feasibility and the practical changes that might need to happen in order for it to take place. And then when they're ready to trial, we study what happens along the way and kind of hold the hand on that journey. And then at the end of the trial phase, we share those insights back to the business by writing them a custom report on what their data that we've collected about them has suggested, so that they've got some hard numbers to hopefully make more of an evidence-based decision on what they might want to do next. And of course, as part of that, we also get amazing research data as well.
And when you talk about a 4-day week, do you suggest that participants work fewer hours overall, or is it about, as I remember a previous employer said to me, you can do 4 days if you want, but we're going to be doing all the hours that you do in 5 in 4 long days. That's kind of one side of it. And then from the employer's perspective, do you expect them to pay their staff the same, or to prorate salaries down to 80%?
Yeah, it's a really important question to clarify on, because there are actually these 3 different versions of a 4-day week. So the first version is what we call working time reduction. This is where staff reduce the amount of time that they spend at work, but they keep their original salary. And Andrew actually described this as a 100-80-100 model, aiming for 100% of performance, productivity or service in 80% of the time for 100% of the salary. So the implication there is you need to find efficiencies in order to get the same amount done, or if you can, even more done in less time. But you retain original salary because the implication is you're aiming for your original level of performance. That contrasts with a model called compressed hours. So that's what you referred to, Sam, where it'd been offered to you, you can do a 4-day week, but we expect you to do the same total number of hours. So that's where you do the same total number of hours, but you distribute them differently in the week. So maybe you move from working 5 standard length days to working 4 longer days. So there's no overall reduction in the total amount of time that you're spending at work across the whole week. You're just clustering it differently. So you can think of this as a 100-100-100 model, 100% performance in 100% of time for 100% of the salary. You're just putting those hours at different points in the diary. And that contrasts again with this third model of part-time working. So this is where you reduce the amount of time that you spend at work, but you also reduce your salary commensurate with that. And there's a sort of implication there from the employer that we don't expect as much performance from you because you've got less time. But I think speaking to HR professionals, we know that in quite a lot of roles, the part-time staff end up doing more or, as much as they might manage with their full-time colleagues do. And those models of part-time and compressed hours have actually been in pretty widespread adoption in the world of work, in the UK at least, for many years as forms of flexible working. And many of our listeners may have them themselves. And for some people, that can be of benefit. But there are different implications there to a working time reduction 4-day week, because you can imagine there are different implications for well-being, different implications around finances, different implications about having time for rest and recuperation, so that then when you do come back to work, you're really firing on all cylinders.
I remember shortly after I did my PhD in psychology in your institution. I went back to I'd been doing kind of a day a week consultancy, and I went to work for an employer that had bought the employer I'd been working for before, and I went back on a 3-day a week basis. I was also teaching statistics at Sussex for a day a week, but on the 3-day a week basis, and it was a timesheeted job. And over the 18 months it took me to extricate myself from that job, I worked an average of 42 hours over those 3 days. So, which was, I mean, it was far from ideal. So I don't think I've shared that with you before, but 42 hours on a 3-day week felt that it was probably not going to be kind of long-term success. But thank you very much for clarifying those different models. I think that really helps. What does participation involve? Both for, I mean, let's not maybe think of a micro business or solopreneurs, but for either a kind of a small or a medium-sized business, what does it involve for both the individuals and for the companies that take part with you?
Yeah, sure. So it's that working time reduction bracket that our project is about. That's what we've been studying. So that's the pool of people we're working with. And generally what happens is we find each other through all sorts of different mechanisms. But generally there is a business who would like to trial a shorter working week. They like the idea of it in principle, but it's what I call the kind of aspiration reality gap of it's not quite clear how do we get there. So before we even get to starting a trial, there's lots of collaboration and discussion from me to usually the senior leadership within that organisation to help them find their flavour. And this is always, a bit of a custom approach because no one size fits all. Every organisation is different, people doing different lines of work. But generally, it's exploring what are all the tasks that your staff do, where are the kind of pinch and pain points, and how can we apply learnings from psychology and those other businesses that we've studied on stuff that would apply to lots of people, things like meetings, how you manage emails, how you prioritize time for deep work in the calendar. But then there's also the business specific adaptations that might need to happen. So that often involves some workshopping directly with staff themselves. Sometimes that's me facilitating it. Sometimes that's others within the business, HR or kind of people managers. And it really is valuable to involve the staff themselves in this because they're actually the ones who know the work the best. They're the ones who have the solutions. They just don't know it yet. And I think we're just so wrapped up in the day-to-day of delivery that we don't often take even just an hour to step back and chat amongst ourselves, chat to colleagues about how we're doing something, and just with some simple discussion prompts, think about why is it that we're being slowed down on this process, and therefore what could we change about it. And the 4-day week or a short working week, we have people doing other flavors of it, so like a 9-day fortnight or 2 half days. It's a bit of a forcing mechanism to just really force people to engage in taking just a little bit of time to have those really powerful, really meaningful, valuable conversations to find. It's rarely big changes. It's often little tweaks that add up, the kind of Olympics strategy, what makes the boat go faster. So that's the kind of first phase of participation in the Sussex 4-day week programme. And then we go into the trial phase just before people switch. We start measuring what we call baseline data. So this is before the shorter working week has started. This is really valuable to get some comparator data to then assess the success of the new working schedule against. And these are standard measures that we take for everyone in the project, looking at a range of well-being, lifestyle, and how people feel about work and are getting on at work in terms of performance. And those are standard occupational psychology measures that we can take for anyone, regardless of the type of work. But we also encourage each organisation to have a careful think about some organisation-specific performance metrics that would relate to their line of work. So, for example, we had an architect's firm. For them, it was number of design steps completed in an hour. For our customer call centre, it was how many calls answered and how long were they spending on the phone with each customer. And usually often people are measuring things, particularly in the larger organizations, less so in the really small businesses and the micros. But if you've got historical data, that's really valuable to compare that, say, the same quarter against in previous years. And if you're not measuring something, before you switch, it's an opportunity to start measuring it. And then at the point that people switch, we then monitor for a period of 12 weeks how that's going with a short weekly self-report survey, looking at mood, wellbeing, burnout, performance and productivity, and enthusiasm and motivation for work and sleep. And then after 12 weeks, we pause measuring so that we can then write a report for the employer on here's what's happened over the last 3 months to give you some hopefully useful metrics and numbers to decide, right, what do we do? Do we continue a trial phase? Do we need to tweak things, or actually has it achieved what we wanted? And we feel we can go ahead and kind of commit to it longer term.
This is a big question I'm going to ask you now, but I know you're up for a challenge. What have you found so far in terms of the impact of moving to 4 days in terms of productivity, in terms of health and well-being?
Mm-hmm, yeah. So firstly, if we think about productivity, that can mean different things to different people, as we've just touched on there, architect's firm versus call centre. But one productivity measure that we've taken that usefully cuts across all sorts of different types of work is what we call goal achievement. So to measure this, at the start of each working week, we ask staff to set themselves 5 work goals or tasks for the coming week ahead. And then at the end of the week, we ask them to tell us how well they feel they met their 5 goals. Essentially, did they tick off their to-do list? And this takes kind of 2-3 weeks to kind of bed in and settle in. But then gradually it starts to climb little bit by little bit as time goes by. And on average, looking across many employers that we've studied, it's an increase of about 8% for the trial period relative to the baseline period. But of course, as we're data specialists here on this podcast, average masks a lot of individual differences in the different journeys that people are going on. So for some people, it stays the same, but that's with less time. So you've at least preserved performance with that time off. Therefore, you have found an efficiency. Some people manage to go even above 8%. So, that's more than that they're getting done in less time. Perhaps we can come on to some of the reasons for that, how they achieve that. But we do also have a minority of employers where it goes down. And from what we can see so far, there doesn't seem to be a strong pattern to that of like clear factors that are at play. But certainly it's not globally the case that you're guaranteed to have higher output afterwards.
Well, hello there. It's your host, Sam here. Now, I won't keep you for long. If you've been inspired by what you've been listening to today, and you'd like to find out what type of data storyteller you are, why not go to our Data Storytelling Scorecard? Just follow the link to data-storytelling.scoreapp.com. That's score app with 2 Ps. Answer 12 simple questions, and you'll instantly be served with a scorecard that tells you exactly what type of data storyteller you are. Now, back to the action and our brilliant guest. You've queued me up nicely. So this achieving more and less. You already touched on setting the 5 weekly goals, on running meetings more efficiently. I mean, particularly, I'm kind of well aware of the benefit of setting an agenda and actually knowing what on earth you're going to be doing in this meeting, and indeed limiting time in meetings. I've got a number of clients I'm working with, usually usually big global corporates, who, to begin with, I thought it was just they were just being iconoclastic by setting meetings that were 5 minutes shorter than half an hour or an hour. But actually, partly it's driven by the fact that people always overrun on calls, and they may be running back to back to back. That's one thing. But actually, it's driven by something bigger than that, which is we're going to spend less time doing this, focus on deep work, only looking at emails at certain times. But what's in the data that you've seen? What's the alchemy that those that achieve more in less time? What's the common threads of alchemy there?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, so there are two that we've identified in terms of psychological changes and processes. I've touched on kind of organizational level changes, such as, group workshops. But we've got some evidence in our data that the more that someone's well-being improves, particularly sleep, the more their productivity goes up. And what's happening there is we're giving people time for rest and recuperation. There are a number of processes that we think it goes down even further into sub-processes. But sleep does seem to be improving both in duration and quality. So what does that mean when you come into work the next day? Well, it means your brain can fire on all cylinders and really prioritize those high-value tasks and crack through them quickly because you're not tired. So that's one angle to it, that the well-being improvements do seem to be associated with improved productivity. It's intuitive, but we've seen that coming through in the data. So statistically, there's a significant correlation between the magnitude of change in someone's sleep and the magnitude of change in their productivity. The second angle to this is the motivational side. So you can do all the group workshops that you like, but ultimately what we're asking staff to do is change behaviour. And some of that is on the team level, such as agreeing to, meeting etiquette and running meetings more efficiently. But some of this is on the individual level as well, around how you're going to intentionally structure your working day to prioritise the high value tasks. If we're talking about more kind of knowledge economy, desk-based business, or even if you're on a production line, like there's a local skincare manufacturer in Brighton who trialled a 4-day week, and they doubled the rate at which people were putting labels on jars. How has that happened? Well, maybe partly it could be the tiredness thing, but speaking to the managing director, it sounds like it was a motivational thing. The staff reported, you know what, I want that time off, so I'm going to go faster. So the motivational side is important too. And the 4-day week or short working week, 9-day fortnight, half days is quite a potent carrot to dangle to engage people in behaviour change at work.
You're absolutely right, because I know there have been all sorts of disruptions and changes, some for the good, some definitely not for the good, as a result of COVID. But generally, in the course of I know that jobs have changed through technology, and we'll come on to AI and how that may also impact. But generally, the compact is that you either leave school or leave university and then work for 40 odd years. And suddenly this thought that actually you're not going to be working, and you work 9 to 5. We listen to Dolly Parton and and Sheena Easton and others who say that's what working life is. I'm really not surprised to hear, but also delighted to hear that you've got the evidence that shows it too. That is a massive motivator. That you're giving people more time for themselves. I wanted to ask, actually, if you have a sense about what people do with their non-working day. Is it hobbies? Is it sleep? Is it R&R? Is it side hustles? Or is it kind of a combination of all of those and more?
Yeah, a combination of all of those and more. So we have been formally asking people to tell us what they get up to on that time off in a time use diary. And we haven't fully crunched all of the numbers yet, but already we can tell, just looking at what people are writing, generally people are using it for restorative activities. I would say the most common ones we see are time with friends and family. That can include pets as well. So sort of longer dog walks. Things that are good for kind of physical health, physical activity, exercise classes, and hobbies. And in the sort of world of psychology models, there's this concept of work recovery. And that can come from two main arms, really, of what we do when we sleep, non-conscious recovery, and then conscious recovery, which are non-work activities that essentially top our batteries back up. And hobbies are one of the top ways of doing that. And so we can see on the Time Use Diary people telling us that they're spending more time, on crafts at home, or, tinkering in the garage or the shed. It's interesting you raise the question of side hustles, because sometimes when we talk to organisational leaders, this is one of the worries that they have of, like, we're going to give people this time off for rest and recuperation, so that then when they do come in, they're far concerned as they're giving us their 100%. But I'm worried that they're not going to do that. They're going to take that time to earn more money somewhere else and not give us the kind of reciprocity back of doing their best work with us. It's relatively rare, and it's pretty uncommon that we've seen that happening. It's not unheard of. Where it seems to be happening is generally younger people who are often wanting to kind of develop more of a portfolio career, or kind of have more opportunities for personal kind of development, where they want to learn a new skill, or perhaps try a new course, or learn something, essentially. So there's an interesting question there about how do we make time for that in their own day job. But those group of individuals would potentially be doing that on a 5-day week anyway. They might just try and squeeze it into the evening or weekend. So we don't have formal data on it. But just anecdotally, from what I've heard, my instinct is they'd be doing it anyway. And in you giving a little bit of extra time away, you're probably still bumping up their rest and recuperation time, because they're now not spending the evenings and weekends on that, side project.
Really interesting. And do you feel, is this genuinely applicable to all kinds of business, from solopreneurs to large firms? And have you noticed kind of different benefits for different sizes of businesses?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if we think specifically about size of businesses, we could have another question about sector and kind of private versus public sector. But focusing just on your actual question there around size, absolutely anyone can do this, but there are different implications, and I think different approaches to preparation for different sizes. So if you're a solopreneur, you're in complete autonomy. You can decide what to do, whatever you want to do. Away you go. We look to help give some tools and advice on structuring your working week, but you've already got a very high degree of autonomy there. Go to the kind of small businesses, and this is the by far and away the most dominant type of business that has trialled a shorter working week in our Sussex project and in the national trials. Small businesses employing 25 staff or fewer, usually. There are probably a number of reasons for that, but I think one of the headline reasons is a really high degree of trust and reciprocity between the staff themselves and the business owner, because everyone knows each other personally, and that kind of social kind of tribe effect helps with that buy-in on all sides. The implications will be around you are going to need to do some workshopping with staff, but you're probably not going to need to make major changes, because there aren't many moving parts where you've got multiple teams who might need to interact and kind of pass work between each other. When you get to the larger organizations, let's say 100 to 500 people, there you have got multiple teams where not everyone knows each other personally. So there's kind of less trust inherent, and there's also more moving parts and kind of pinch points. So you can absolutely do it, but you're going to need probably a longer preparatory lead-in period with a lot more workshopping on a team basis. What are the changes you're going to make with the people who you do know? But then the team leaders are also going to need to talk to each other, and you might even need the non-managers, the actual staff, to talk to each other across teams as well. So there's a lot more workshopping to be done there. And some people, there are some great examples of businesses in this category. Atom Bank, I think, are a nice example. They employ about 500 people. So then once you get beyond that, again, you can absolutely do it, but there I've seen a more common approach being, okay, let's do it just in one pocket of the business and sort it out there. And then let's see if we can broaden it out. So if it's an international business, let's tackle just one geographical location first and then sort that out and stage it.
I can imagine in kind of in businesses that we often deal with that are often very siloed. I mean, you say that they don't know each other. Often even the finance team and the procurement team don't know one another.
Exactly.
But I can imagine procurement not working, procurement suddenly working kind of more efficiently on less time, and finance being completely blindsided by it. So I can absolutely see that there's an organizational element there. Well, you raised it. How about sectors? Do you have enough data to be able to say that, I don't know, oak frame barn building creating businesses work not as well as digital marketing agencies? Have you got suggestions on sectors yet? Or
so firstly, if we think just about the private sector, there's a big juicy piece there around public sector, but within the private sector, anyone can do it. But there, just like with the size of organisation, there are some very clear trends in our Sussex programme and the national trials that it's desk-based knowledge economy businesses who have been doing this most commonly. And I think a big reason for that is it's more obvious how we adapt knowledge economy desk-based work to find efficiencies, a lot of which we've touched on around the meetings, email habits, prioritising high-value work over low-value work. But that's not to say there aren't businesses who are doing, say, manufacturing or production line work or kind of rota-based, say, healthcare type work who haven't done it, because they have. They're in our trial. They're in the national trials. So in the national trials, there are some multiple examples of breweries who've done this. And sometimes they just chose to close production entirely on one day. Part of this originally came out of COVID and kind of cost of living crisis of energy use. But there's one brewery I'm aware of who've got a team A, team B kind of setting to it. So they've maintained the production line over 5 days, and half of the people are in on a Monday, half are in on a Friday. And that's working well for them. Then we've got a kind of rota-based or kind of setting. Healthcare is a good example of this. So we had a residential care company who kind of need to staff the caring on a rota. There was a cost implication because they did find efficiencies, because everyone has some desk work and admin stuff to do at some point, right? So they did get more efficient with their admin work, and they found they were getting through it more quickly because they were less tired. So even in rota organisations, you can always find efficiencies with that carrot of the motivation and the rest and recuperation. But ultimately, you may still have to address the fact that you can't quite fully cover the rota. So they did actually hire a temporary member of staff over the trial period. For them, they were particularly concerned about recruitment and retention, and they were spending a lot on agency bank staff anyway. And over the trial period, none of the salaried staff left. So it seemed to be a success in that costs were partly being offset by less reliance on agency bank staff. But when they looked to scale it up more widely, it did stall in terms of those finances. So you can absolutely do it practically, but there are some sectors where there may be a degree of financial implications. If you're going for a 20% reduction, you may not actually need to find 20% extra budget. You may need to find actually much less budget than you think you do because of costs being offset elsewhere. But some sectors may need to just bear that in mind.
Not least, I would have thought, cost offset, maybe particularly in knowledge economy jobs, but not exclusively. Not least in not having to pay recruiters 20% of first year's salary package for people who are leaving so often, because I'm conscious that one of the impacts of this motivational change of behaviour is if my employer is doing a 1080, 180, 100 for me, I'm making more money and able to be fresher and rested and recuperated, then I'm going to almost certainly commit an extra year, 5 years of my career to working with them, and therefore they're not going to have to retrain, they're not going to have to rehire. Yeah, no, I can absolutely see how that snowballs. Do you have a sense? I mean, I'm sure, as with most of my questions, it kind of depends, and there are many flavors. But do you have a sense about what is the most popular new non-working day? I mean, I can think about the meditation app Headspace always talks about the Sunday scaries. Is it Monday to avoid Sunday scaries? Is it Wednesdays for a 2-day two mini weeks? Is it Friday for a long weekend? Or does it just depend on the individual?
So it depends on the organisation.
On the organisation.
But I'm really glad you asked this, Sam, because I think it will help us do some myth busting. Lots of people, when you say the phrase 4-day week, lots of people assume that means, right, you're closed on Fridays. And instantly that turns a lot of people off because they think, well, we couldn't possibly do that because we need to maintain our original opening hours. That's not for us. But in fact, it's a minority of organisations that close entirely on a Friday. In the Sussex programme, it's been about 25% who chose to have all staff off on a Friday. Much more common in our research has been to have staff off on different days. And there are sub-models to that. So that can be completely different days. Sam's off on a Monday, I'm off on a Tuesday, Josephine is off on a Wednesday, etc. Or the Team A, Team B structure that I mentioned, the brewery used earlier. Nearly 50% of our participants, our organisations chose to have people off on different days. I think that partly reflects these being small businesses and needing to just sort of pivot when people are around in order to not make major changes to opening hours. The second, when people chose to close for an entire day, the second most popular day to have off was a Wednesday. To go for a model of like 2 days of intense work, firing all cylinders, have a rest, and then go in for another 2 days, firing all cylinders, have a rest. Interestingly, only one employer that we've worked with chose to go for a Monday. Which was partly because the organisation leader had the Sunday scaries. But also it was just because that tended to be a quieter day for them operationally. And Friday tended to be one of their busier days where clients tended to request meetings, just because of where their client base was. So yeah, Mondays is relatively rare unless it's part of that Team A, Team B structure, I would say.
I know that I've mentioned COVID before, but I was intrigued to see in a number of pubs local to me in Lewes in Sussex, but also elsewhere, that because the model was that we were open for 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's what we did, and then quite a lot of them realizing that they didn't really need to be open Monday or Tuesday, and they were able to adapt. I guess what and this is not kind of pandemic related, but what you're demonstrating through your accumulation of data is that actually it may not be necessary. There may be peaks and troughs that you haven't even kind of thought to analyze. Thinking on the sort of the stickability, I assume you go back to both participants and to businesses. Do you get a sense that when you go back after 6 months, a year, however long, that people are staying with it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in terms of formal measurement, the longest that we measure for is 9 months. So after that initial 12-week trial period where we're measuring quite intensely, we then let people go of the burden of surveys for 6 months. But then we come back to them and say, okay, how are you now? Have you stuck with it, or have you evolved it into something else? And how's that going for you 6 months since we were last in contact? So in terms of formal data that we get there, generally, again, this is on average, individual differences, different journeys and trajectories, but generally 80% are still on it. And what they're reporting on the questionnaires looks to be maintained, or in some cases is actually even better. So another common worry that organisations have is this just going to be kind of a boomerang or kind of honeymoon effect, and like after the initial pleasantries wear off, it kind of becomes normalised, and we just regress back to baseline. over that time window that we've measured, it looks like that's not the case. The benefits seem to be maintained in sleep, in burnout, in work engagement. That's how enthusiastic and motivated you feel, and in self-reported productivity. So it looks like the honeymoon doesn't end, it just continues. But there are a minority of organisations who choose to discontinue. So this has been about 10% in our sample. Those have been for a few different reasons, but generally operational reasons. So we had a tech business who were on the larger side, and they found operationally, because a lot of their clients and also their suppliers weren't on a kind of a shorter working week model, there were still some pain points in the week. So internally it worked well for them, but the kind of external facing interaction remained a bit of a challenge. But there's another 10% who evolve it, or iterate it or tweak it. So we had an underfloor heating company who chose to do it on a seasonal basis. For most of the year, they have the shorter working week, but they have a seasonal peak in the autumn for about 8 weeks where all the builders want to buy the underfloor heating. So during that window, staff then go up to the original hours, and it's just a kind of all hands on deck. But we know this is for an intense burst, and then we're going to get the shorter working week back again. We had another organisation who trialled a 9-day fortnight, where every other week they had a day off and then a day set aside for training and development. And then they liked that. That was working well. They managed to get all the core business done in the 4 days. And they thought, we'd love that training and development day, but actually we want another day for kind of strategy and projects. And we'd love to do a bit more corporate social responsibility, so not to get a volunteering day in there as well. So then they moved to this kind of 4-week rotation of a day off, day for training and development, day for strategy and projects, and a volunteering day.
Brilliant. What I mean, it strikes me that kind of flexibility is the key. That clearly one size doesn't fit all, as you've said more than one time. But I love that. Having, and let's say it's a Friday, but that one Friday and what seems like a red thread running through all of those is that they're working on the business rather than working in the business. Yeah. Really good. Really good to hear. Let's talk a little bit about AI. There are so many tasks in knowledge economy jobs, from content creation to research, from data analysis to coding, that I'll say can, not are, that can increasingly at some level be performed by not only large language models but other tools as well. Is the 4-day working week going to be necessary to sustain employment? In fact, is it maybe more likely you might need to go down to kind of 3 or 2 days? Are you feeling an impact of AI? One in enabling your 100 model working time reduction successes to succeed? Are they using AI to do that? And 2, do you think there are kind of bigger, longer ramifications there?
Absolutely. So I think that there's 2 parts to this. The first part is around, does it actually help enable a shorter working week because it helps people find that 20% or whatever the reduction is efficiency? Then there's the threat to everyone's jobs. So if we unpack that first domain around, is it in the shorter term actually helping enable shorter working weeks? You used a lovely phrase there, Sam, of can, not necessarily are. I feel like a lot are talking about it, but for many it's not actually necessarily happening that much. In the shorter working week trials, our trial, the national trials, as we've said several times, it's quite small businesses that are volunteering, putting themselves forward, wanting to try that. And here there often isn't kind of capacity or in-house expertise or the right kind of people in the right roles to necessarily take this on as a project. And what I'm observing quite a bit is sort of ad hoc tinkering, but it's not necessarily happening in a more structured way. And there is, of course, big potential there. But I'm a psychologist, so I'm always going to come back to this from a psychology angle, that you can find the whiz-bang AI tool, but if you don't use it effectively, it doesn't necessarily save you time. and may cause you more headaches, going down rabbit holes. So if you wrap this into the preparation of a trial, what I would, if that's you and you're thinking about it, I would suggest, okay, we've talked about deep work or kind of focus time periods for high value tasks, and the training and development day that organization put in place. To do this effectively and capitalize on it, you probably do need to set aside project time to really work on this. It's not going to happen magically overnight without giving people dedicated time in the diary to actually, what we're talking about is learning. We're talking about continuing professional development. And when people are bogged down in the day-to-day, this is not going to magically happen. And I think particularly in small businesses, why is it not happening? Because people are stuck in the day-to-day. So give people protected time in the diary, but also have team conversations about exactly what tools you're going to try out, and do this in a structured manner rather than just right away you go, you've got an afternoon, sort out an AI tool to process our email inbox. You come up with a short list of the particular tools and pick your top one that you're going to try out. If anyone is interested in this, one of our participating employers is an AI consultancy. I won't share their name because we're not here to plug individual organizations, but contact me if you would like their details. And they can do a kind of structured program around that.
Sounds really interesting. I'm well aware of that. There's a much cited and kind of misquoted Harvard Business Review article from 25 that demonstrates that fully 95%, 19 in every 20 experiments with AI have failed in small, medium, and large companies, and in no small part because it kind of gives people more to do. It's about grafting something on top of something else rather than fundamentally restructuring. Have you, in your, you've been running, certainly from the pilot, you've been running this since before the mass availability of large language models. Have you? I'm just interested in kind of in the application of AI in academic psychology. Are you using tools that you weren't using when you started this project that are helping you to process data quicker and enjoy your Friday? Or
yeah, we are. Yeah, so there's one tool that we're using to do things more quickly and more easily and free up time. There's another tool which likely will free up a bit of time, but also might enable us to do a process kind of better or more consistently. So I'll give you both of those examples. So for 2 or 3 years now, we've been using these tools to help with processing our MRI data, and that's not actually processing the scans. There's data security questions there. We would not, we don't upload our MRI brain scans to any of these commercial platforms. Certainly not. It's sensitive data. But to analyze that MRI data, what we need to do is we actually need to run it through software on our own servers. And that software requires quite a high level of computer programming because there's a lot of kind of customizability in the exact analysis steps that we pull those images through to actually get to our end kind of blobs on brains, if anyone has ever seen any of those types of studies on documentaries. And nowadays we're using Python for that. If anyone isn't a computer programmer, that's basically a computer programming language that you can use to kind of custom build analysis pipelines. And you do need a kind of base level of Python to be able to actually make use of AI. But researchers in the team are using AI to speed up their programming, where they might do a first draft of some programming code to analyze the MRI, and then they'll interact with the AI to just kind of tweak things or optimize things, or say, oh, I want to do ... tell me how to do it. And then the AI will give some suggested code, and then they'll look at that and go, okay, yeah, that code is good and I'm testing it and that's doing what I want. Or, okay, that's not quite what I wanted, but it's given me what I need to now write what we do need to do. So it's like having a friend alongside you to give you ideas on the programming, rather than kind of banging your head against it solo for a time. But you do need a base level of coding to be able to give it the right prompts and to be able to check that what it's giving you is what you want, because that's not always the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think there's a limiting false belief that says that large language models are going to be able to replace coding, because coding isn't just about doing it kind of once and done. It's about making sure it works for all for all eventualities, and that need for the craft and the knowledge and the context will remain.
Yeah. Shall I also tell
Finally,
you about the second example?
yeah, do.
So this is going to speed us up, but it might also help us standardize. So we've got these time use diaries where participants tell us how they're spending their time on their fifth reader, and it's free form text. They just describe in their own words what they're doing. And we need to convert that to numeric data in order to tot up, well, how many minutes a day are they sleeping? How many minutes a day are they doing chores at home? How many minutes a day are they spending on hobbies? And the general approach for this is, from their free-form text, we classify that into categories such as sleeping, household chores, hobbies, pet care. And there are different kind of coding schemes for this, but a common one is a kind of 69 categories. And this is quite a labor-intensive process for someone to look at what have they written in free-form text and then go, right, okay, they're telling me about going on a walk with someone and there's a pet there as well. Okay, how do I classify that? Is that exercise? Is it social time, or is it pet care? So previously we've used humans to do that kind of decision-making process. But we're going to do that on a subset of our data, and then to speed us up, we will be using a large language model to then do that categorization for us. And we will do some inter-rater reliability to check that it is actually allocating them correctly. But then we will be able to standardize that, where previously we might have had to have like 3 people do it just because of the sheer volume. Now we can speed it up and we can standardize it with there being the one main like rater of the model.
Brilliant. And finally, you've already told us that you very much practice what you preach. Do you require, or do you suggest that those others on your team are also 4-day weekers?
Yeah. So whenever someone starts in the team, I offer it to them. But for me, I think this is about giving people the choice and saying, we want to give you that time back, and we think we were seeing it in our own data that well-being was improving, that performance was improving, and that there was that link between improved well-being and improved performance. So, as a team leader, how could I not look at that data and go, right, probably we should follow this as an approach. But we don't want to sort of mandate anything for anyone, so we offer it to them, and we chat through what form of it would you like. Most in our team have opted for a 4-day week day off model, but someone else has gone for 2 half days. And as part of that, we have conversations of, nevertheless, we need to make sure we get things done in our time at work. We've got to cover up participant data collection, and that means turning up to the MRI centre at particular times of day. And it also means making sure that we're ticking off our to-do list. Are we getting that programming done? Are we coding the time use diaries? Are we producing academic outputs? We also have targets for sharing the end of trial reports back to the participating employers. We need to do that within a minimum time window of them finishing. So we have to hit those performance targets as a team. Yeah.
Very, very, very good to hear that you practice what you preach, and that it's not a case of cobbler's children's shoes. Finally, Charlotte, where can our viewers and our listeners find out more about you and your work online and in social?
Great, thanks, Sam. So our project website, Sussex 4dayweek.co.uk. That's 4-day week with a number 4. That's got lots of our program information about what we found so far, who's taken part, and how you can get involved if you would like to. And there are a number of options there. You can take part in the shorter working week group, or you can also take part. We haven't talked yet about our control group, but we are also taking all the same measures in a group of employers who don't change working patterns. So if you fancy a brain scan or a report on staff wellbeing and performance, then you can also enter the research in the control group. So feel free to, there's a little form where you can pop your details if you would like any more information about that.
Perfect. We will, of course, include that in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time today, Charlotte. I think if there were only more people with your approach to using data to inform decision-making, there'd be rather less malarkey in the evolving modern workplace for everyone's benefit and rather more data-driven common sense. Charlotte Rae, thank you so much for joining us today.
Lovely to be here, Sam. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to Data Malarkey, the podcast about using data smarter. If you've enjoyed this latest episode and liked what you've heard, why not subscribe and leave a review on the podcast platform where you found us? Do share Data Malarkey with your friends, colleagues and collaborators.